Kalkalosh, good evening. We're continuing on Parashat Mishpatim. This is Pasuk Bet, Perek Aleph, chapter 21, Pasuk Bet. We said, Ki tikne eved ivri. So now we have to understand what is the reason why we are going to start with eved ivri. Meaning that, okay, yesterday we explained why is it that we start with Mishpatim right after the Seret Dibrot, right after the Ten Commandments, and we started explaining. Now it says like this. What does it mean, right? Ki tikne eved ivri. It says the Ramban and the Rabbeinu Bachayai. Okay, so says the Ramban and Rabbeinu Bachayai. He comes and he says as follows. Why is it that we started with the Eved Ivri? Mipnei, sheyesh beshiluach ha'eved b'shana shevit. So he says, so says the Ramban and the Rabbeinu Bachayai. The Ramban and the Rabbeinu Bachayai says that the reason why we started with Eved Ivri because the shiluach of ha'eved is in the 7th year. And when it's going to be in the 7th year, it's Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim and also Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. So remember, the 7th year is Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim, and Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, Hanizkar B'Dibur Rishon. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim was in the first of the 10 commandments, if you remember. Kemoshe Amar B'Din Nakat Eved Ivri, just like the Eved Ivri. You remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed you. That's why I commanded you today, right? To actually free the Eved Ivri. Also, Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. Just like the Shabbat is to remember Maaseh Bereshit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in 6 days. Right? V'yom hashvi'i yom menucha, and the 7th day was vayanach b'yom hashvi'i. He rested on the 7th day. Ken adin hazeh zecher ma'aseh bereshit. So too, it's also zecher ma'aseh bereshit. Why? Ki ana hashana hashvi'it le'eved zman menucha m'lechet adon k'yom hashvi'i. The 7th year is like the Shabbat. It's like the sabbatical for the Eved Ivri. Ki hashvi'i nivcharo le'olam, because always the 7th was always chosen by Hashem. Whether it is in the days, that's why you have Shabbat. Whether it is in the years, Shemitah, Uveshua Shanim, right? B'yamim, also when you have the 7 times 7 to become the Yovel, right? B'yamim Yoshvi Shabbat, Uveshanim Ashana Shvi Shemitah, which is also called Shabbat, Uveshivua Shanim Shemitah Shvit, Mitzvat Yovel. V'chol ze yikar echad novea mimakor echad. It's all the same concept. V'usod yemot ha'olam, and it's a secret behind the creation of days. Hanizkar beParashat Bereshit ad Vaychulu, which is brought down in Parashat Bereshit until Vaychulu. V'lachen hamitzvah azot, and therefore the mitzvah of Eved Ivri, reuya la'akdim ota shenichbeda meod. We're going to put it at the beginning because it's very important. Romezet dvarim gedolim b'maaseh Bereshit, and it's going to hint to us a lot of things in Maaseh Bereshit. V'lachen achmid ba'navi meod, and that's why the Navi was so stringent on Eved Ivri, that he said, everyone has to send out their slaves. If we don't send out our slaves, we get exiled. So he says, just like it's brought down by Shmitat Haaretz, by Shemitah. So just like by Shemitah, if we don't keep the Shemitah, we get galut. If we get exile, if we do not send out our Eved Ivri, exile. But it's the same halacha. Eved Ivri is Zecher Maaseh Bereshit, Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, both of them, just like the 10 commandments. And therefore, the first mitzvah, to remember Shabbat and to remember the creation of the world. Okay? Very good. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim and Zecher Maaseh Bereshit. Okay? The next is the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, right? So this is the reason, first we explained why is it that it's the first one. Meaning the first mitzvah that we bring down, or the first of the Mishpatim is Eved Ivri, we explained. Now let's try to understand. It says, Ki tikne Eved Ivri. Keshetikne Eved Ivri zeu pshuto. When you're going to buy an Eved Ivri, that's a pshuto. But what's the midrash? Ki tikne Eved Ivri, whether you are going to be koneh, you are actually being koneh. Shelo tomar ekne Eved she'evod ba'olam. Velo ekne Eved she'achar sheshanim yishalachenu, which means like this. You have a choice. Yeah, business proposition. I'm going to ask you guys, what's better? If I'm already going to buy an Eved, should I buy an Eved that he goes out after the 6th year? Or should I buy an Eved? What? Take a goy. Take a goy. Leolam ba'em ta'avodu. Forever. Eternity. Yeah, it goes in Yerusha. So what are you going to decide? So it says Midrasho. What does it tell you? Keshe'ata koneh Heve kaneh v'divri. If you're already going to buy a slave, buy Eved Ivri. Why? Shelo tomar ekne Eved sheva, but don't say I'm going to buy an Eved which is going to be forever. Velo ekne Eved. The opposite. Ki tikne Eved Ivri. When you're going to buy a slave, make sure you buy an Eved Ivri. Which means don't start making business propositions. You're going to buy a slave, make sure you buy an Eved Ivri. Now he says, so now another question. Why is it called Eved Ivri? What should you call him? Who's this Eved Ivri? Is it Jew or Goy? Eved Yehudi, Israeli. So listen to this. Hatam shekerao Eved Ivri velo Eved Israel. Why is he called Eved Ivri? The Hebrews, remember, Abraham Avinu was called Ivri before the entire concept of Judaism, not afterwards. Yeah. So says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Ki chasha katuv liyaches shem avdut al Israel. We never want to say Eved on Israel. Even though he's Jewish, but I don't want to say a Israel and a slave. Pashnish, they say in Chakatia. You know Chakatias, yeah? Yeah, Pashnish means in Yiddish, yeah, but which means it doesn't go. You cannot put Eved and a Jew, Israel, together. So he said Eved Ivri. Why? But says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, we don't want to put the word Eved on Israel. Israelim, they're the highest level. There's no such thing as Avadim. So therefore, when it says Eved, it's Eved Ivri, because there's no such thing as an Eved by Israel. We don't want to put Eved by Israel. That's Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Davar Acher, another explanation. Mishum Shelashon Ivri, hu Shema Yichus Shaya Lam Yisrael Kodem Sheshamu Dvarim BeSinai. The entire concept of Ivri was before we became Yehudim. Before we heard Ma'amar Har Sinai. V'zeh ha'eved yitnaker atzmo kilu shelo shema dvarim b'Sinai. And like what Sami just said right now, this person, he did an avirah. He made himself kilu, he didn't hear. He was hearing, but he didn't hear what was written in Sinai. By Sinai, what did we say? That kili avadim, that you guys have to become avadim to who? To the one and only. There's only one and only. Hashem. Hashem is the only one, right? That he's the only one, that he's the king of the kings. He's everything. He's the only one which is echad. You understand? He's the only thing which is echad. There's nothing else in the world which is echad other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's the only one. But he says, but what happened? What happens is that this Eved Ivri didn't hear it. So therefore we give him the name of the Jews before Ma'amad Har Sinai. We give the name of the Jews before what happened with Har Sinai. Therefore he's called an Eved Ivri. And we don't call him, right, an Eved Israel or Eved. So two different explanations. Why is he called Eved Ivri? Okay, fine. Now it's interesting. Because by us, he's called an Eved Ivri. Parashat Mishpatim. There's another two parashiot that the Torah comes and it doesn't call him an Eved at all. You know what he calls himself? He calls him Achicha. Achicha Ivri. It says Parashat Behar, right, which speaks about Shemitah also, and also Parashat Re'eh. Over there, it's written Koreo Achicha, Velo Yizkir Shem Eved. It's not written Eved. V'amar b'sifra Kim Kolecha Achicha, when he's going to sell himself to you as a brother. Why? Shetinhog bo be'achva. You have to act like him, like a brother. So yachol afu yinhog be'atzmo be'achva. So maybe he's going to act with you also like a brother. Tamulumar Eved. HaKeitzad, how is that? Ata noheg bo be'achva. You have to treat him like your brother. But he's going to treat himself like a slave, which is a very important concept in Judaism, which means many times in Judaism we see that there's such a concept that I have to act in a certain way towards you, but that doesn't make it reciprocal, or it doesn't make it that it's a mutual. Sometimes all of a sudden you have to turn it around and it's going to act the same way back. And that's, by the way, in a lot of things. For example, in chinuch, many times it has to be that sometimes, right, we have to actually befriend. We have to be friends, whether it is with our children, whether it is with our students, but not because of that, all of a sudden, they are going to become friends back with you. I still remember my uncle from Termolinos. He always used to tell me, you have to be very, very careful how you act with the Balei Batim. When I told him why, he says, if you befriend them too much, they act with you like a friend, and you're not their friend. You're their rabbi. At the time, I never understood what he meant. You know, I wasn't a rabbi at the time. I was okay. I was an avrech. I was a rabbi, but it was never the same thing. But then I said to himself, why? You go, you have to become their friends. But now I understand because of this. It's true. you have to become their friends. And you have to become, right? You have to act with them with that. But they can never act with you like a friend. They have to act like with you, like the Rav. And that's why it's very, very important, right? Because if not, what happens is, if it only becomes friends, so what happens? There's nothing there. So same thing. Eved Ivri, the Parashiyot later on calls him Achicha. You're right. You act with him like Achicha. He acts with you like he's an Eved. And that's the way that it's supposed to work. Okay? Very good. Now says, by the way, you should know that there's just so much information in this Parasha, and to do with the 6 years, and with this, and with the Shvi, and there's just an enormous amount. I'm only just giving you a little bit of the tidbits, a little bit of the small chidushim. We're going now to Pasuk Gimel. Okay, so now we understood why. First of all, yesterday we spoke about the entire concept of the Mishpatim, how they're supposed to be. They have to be laws. They have to be that you understand the laws, and so on and so forth. And why is it right after Sinai? Then now we spoke about Eved Ivri, and then we speak about why is he called Eved Ivri. Now it says, Im begapo yavo begapo yetzeh. So which means like this. What does this mean? Rashi says begapo, which means if he's coming in by himself or not. So listen to Rashi. Rashi says, begapo yetzeh. Piresh Rashi, magid shim lo haya nasui mitechila, en rabo moselo shivcha kenanit al korcho leolid mimena avadim. So it all depends. If he was already married, so you could give him a shivcha kenanit. And then those children belong to the master. So one more time. An Eved Ivri, if he's married and he sells himself to become an Eved Ivri, sells himself means obviously that the Bedin, because that's what we're going to see later on, that here we're only talking about where the Bedin sold him, not that he sold himself, because he actually stole, he didn't have enough money, and therefore he had to be sold as an Eved Ivri. So if he comes in and he's married, you could give him against his will a Shivcha Kenanit, the Shivcha Kenanit, which means a Goya, right, that she's your Shivcha. And what happens is the children, they belong to the master. They don't belong to the guy. Right? Remember, from a goya, the children are never mityaches to the father. So therefore, what happens is that the shivcha kenani, the children, they go to the master. However, what happens if he comes without a wife? You're not allowed to give him any wife. You're not allowed to give him anything. So it says mashma, shima eved rotze b'shivcha kenanit mutar afilu en lo isha ubanim. So first of all, he says, what happens if the guy doesn't care? The guy says, you know what? David Ivri says, you know what? He doesn't mind. I mean, even though he came in not married, he doesn't mind. So says the Ritva, permitted. And that's also Mishnah Lamelech and so on and so forth. Okay, fine. Now, what happens is, however, though, some people say that it's a sur. That means even if he does want to, it's a sur. Why? There's a Meidi that he says that it's a sur, right? And okay, fine. Now it says like this. What's the reasoning why? Now let's try to get into the understanding, meaning we're going to try to go deep into the Torah to understand what's the reasoning behind this concept. Why is it that if he comes in married, so you could give him a shivcha kenanit? If he comes in by himself, you can't force him. And the only question is, what happens if he agrees to? Do you still do it or not? But why? And when not. Number one, listen to this, musar askel. תחשהו פנוי, חיישינן כשימסור לו שפחה כנענית יאבנה ולא ירצה לצאת. It's very simple. The guy was never married before. If he was never married before, and now, against his will, you would be able to come and give him a shivcha kenanit, he was never married. So he's going to fall in love with her. And then what happens is, he's never going to want to leave. כי אין אדם מוצא קורת רוח, אלא מאשתו ראשונה. Because a person only finds appeasement, there has to be a better word, korat ruach, enjoyment, fulfillment, what? Tranquility, fulfillment, right? At ease, right? He says that only from his first wife. Right? So what happened?
Rabbi.
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yes.
What do we do in our case that we married second time? I said okay.
Okay, so he says, "Im ken ena shivcha ishto rishona." But what happens if he already has a wife? So now the shivcha is not his wife, not his first wife. So we don't have to suspect for it. So there's no problem. Bet, second reason, shehoil va'isha viladea tieled ladonea. Since the wife and the children are going to belong to the master, because again, one more time, the Shivcha Kenanit always stays with the master, and the children always stay with the master. So what? This is first children. Meaning, if he already came in with a wife and children, so okay, fine. He's going to have a few more children now. Okay, fine. But this is his first children. No, he's going to leave in the master's house. He doesn't want to do that. So because he doesn't want to do that, what happens? We say you're not allowed to give it to the Baal Kocho. So if he was not married, his master cannot give it to him. But if he's already married, he doesn't feel that bad anymore because he already had children. He already has his wife. He has his children. No problem. Third reason. שאולי האישה הישראלית שלו, היא הסיתה אותו לחטוב לגנוב את האחרים. We're punishing her. We're punishing his wife. Why? Because if he was married, maybe his first wife, maybe this wife was the one that she was the one that she was mesita auto, which means she caused him to steal. Because I don't know whether it was that she caused him to steal because she put a lot of pressure on him or because of whatever it is. So what happens is, right? She comes and she tells her husband, bring, we want to drink, we want to do this. So therefore, since she was the cause of the sin, the pasuk punishes her and is going to bring her tzarata, the co-wife, right, which is called her tzarata, in her house. Which means something incredible. Which means if a person already had to steal and he's married, it means usually that the wife had something to do with it. Because if not, then the wife would have stopped him from doing so. Daled, fourth reason. If he was already married and therefore he already had relations, so his husband, the master, could give it to him. Because it's not something new. He was normal, he was used to doing this. But if he was never married, his master cannot give it to him. Because now this is something new. And he's not accustomed to it. So it's much more difficult for him. Because now he has to also appease her. And also he has to work. He doesn't have the same strength anymore. So that's number 4. Reason number 5. Yeah, reason number 5. Kol panui shi'ir'eh shivcha yafa, yafkir mamono v'yimkor atzmo kedei she'yisa shivcha. What happens if you have a guy that he doesn't have that much money? But what happens? He sees a beautiful shivcha. So what is he going to do? He's going to make everything that he has hefker, and all of a sudden he comes and he sells himself as a slave. Why does he do that? He put his shuf ainik. He saw the shivcha. She was yafat ayin. She was a beauty. So what did he? So we don't want that. So therefore, if he was never married, he's not allowed to. So therefore, even if he wanted to, it doesn't help. Reason number 6. ולכן התירה התורה לאדון למסור לו שפחה כנען ללא לבנים לעבדות, וזה לא שייך בו באין לו אישה בנים. Basically like this. Imagine right now, right, you have a person that he's being sold as an Eved Ivri. What happens to his wife and children? What happens to the wife and children? They go with him. They don't become slaves. They don't become that, but they come with him. But the master has to support the wife and the children. So the master, what? What a burden. What a burden. Who in the right mind is going to do that? So the Torah comes and says, if a man is already coming in with the wife and children, so the Torah permitted the master to give him a shivcha kenanit in order to have children, so at least he produces that way. But if the Eved comes by himself, so there's no burden. So therefore, the master does not have the rights to give him a shivcha kenanit in order to have children. Because there was no burden, there was nothing there. So therefore, it's like a, how do you call it? It's like a reward, or it's like a settlement. It's like an enticement that, listen, you're already going to have to bring in with the wife and children. You're going to have to support them. So we give you a special eter. You're allowed to give him a shivcha kananit even against his will. You're going to have the children. Now you keep the children. You keep the shivcha kananit. And then it's worth it. Right? Why? Because afterwards, you actually have slaves. You have more slaves, and these slaves are yours forever. So therefore, these are 6 different reasons why we actually come and we say that the person, only if he was married, are you able to give him a shivcha kenanit against his will and the children stay to the master. But if not, no. So we got 6 different reasons. Okay, these are all the different reasons that are brought down, whether Rav Matunuda, Moshav Zekenim, and all the other Rishonim. Okay, fine. Imbali Shahu, what does that mean? Right? It says over here, what does that mean in Bali Shahu? hu ma'aseh yadav shel rabo, ve'en ma'aseh yedei ishto banav shel rabo, אלא הרי הם לבעלה כדין כל שאר הנשים, שכל שזוכה הבעל באשתו, זוכה זה, אף על פי שהוא עבד עברי. כך פסק הרמב"ם. So now we have an interesting case, a machloka between the Rambam and the Ramban. We just said that if the man, this Eved Ivri, is married and he has children, so what happens? They come in with him. They don't have to work. They're not slaves, but they are supported by the master. What happens now if the wife or children go out to work? Who gets that money? Does it go to the husband or the father, basically, or does it go to the master? So says the Rambam, it goes to the husband. Why? It's like any other woman, because kol shezocheh baal bishto, he's zocheh here as well. So he's an Eved Ivri, fine. His whatever he does goes to his master, but whatever the wife does goes directly to him, because only what was his directly is subjugated towards the master, but not anything else. However, though the Ramban says maaseh yedehem goes to the master, not to the husband. Why? Since the master is obligated in the parnasah of this wife and children, right? So therefore, eno shelo, it's not like his, right? But it's like the Eved himself. So therefore, yicholim em lomar eno nuziv eno nusim. So basically, they could come and they could say, listen, we're not going to work, and we're not, but technically speaking, according to the Shittat Ramban, it goes to the master. It doesn't go to the husband. Okay? Fine. Now says, V'yatzea ishto imo, right? What does it mean the wife goes out with him? Who is the one that brought her in? Right? So we already said, right, that what happens is that the wife goes in, we already mentioned before, the wife and the children go in with Eved Ivri. What's the reason? Says the Ramban, why is it that the master is obligated in the parnasah of the wife and children? He says, "Dechemla Torah la'isha v'banim shechayehem truim lahem mineged, metzapim lidei abal." The wife and children, they're always looking towards the husband for support, and the father towards support. And now, what happened? He gets slaved. So now what? That's it. So therefore, so now the master becomes instead of the husband, which means that now they still need a support line. They need a breadwinner. So now it has to be the husband, the master. So it's not only just on the man. So again, this is the same Shitat Ramban that he gets also the parnasah of the wife and the children. But basically, the concept behind it is because since they're looking towards the father or the husband, and now he's being sold, so what are they going to do? So for now, the master has to become instead of the husband. Okay, and this Bezat Hashem, we continue tomorrow.